Hey, what's going on, RotoBallers? Welcome to Week 16, almost anyway. We're getting close. Monday Night Football first half is over with. Only one more half to go until we officially move on to Week 16. But we need to spend a little time tonight talking about waiver wires. It's never too late in the season to be picking some guys up off of the waiver wires, and that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. Who are some guys that you could take a shot at this week if you find yourself in a position where you need help with your lineup this week? I'm Kyle Richardson, Senior Fantasy Analyst for RotoBaller.com. Welcome to the Roto Revolution Waiver Wire Show. Make sure you like the video. If you could do that, comment with any questions that you have. We'll try to get to those as quickly as possible. We'll talk about some of the questions that are showing up in the chat. Again, it is a live show right now, but if you're watching this show after it is dropped and recorded, make sure you comment with your questions. Hit me up on Twitter, though. I am most active on Twitter this week. It's hard to get to all the questions here on YouTube. Hit me up on Twitter at krich1532. If you're watching right now, there are going to be no timestamps. Okay, I got a lot of comments last week about timestamps. No timestamps. This is a live video. We're going to talk about wide receivers first, and then we're going to talk about running backs, and then we're going to talk... Actually, we'll talk about running backs first. We'll talk about running backs and wide receivers, and then we'll talk about QBs and tight ends a little bit at the end there. Lots of things coming in here. Let's get this W, Kyle. Absolutely. Brisley says, thanks you guys so much. I've been watching you guys since week 1, and now I'm in the divisional round of my fantasy championship. No problem, Brisley. Glad that you are glad that you're going to a championship there. Eli says you guys called it all. Appreciate it. Sup, Kyle? Thanks for helping me to the Super Bowl. From Brian. No problem, Brian. Eli says you guys are taking me to the promised land. No, guys, you guys took yourself to the promised land. You took yourself to the promised land. We just helped this year and gave you some excellent advice, I hope. Jake and myself killing it on the channel. Obviously, Pierre and Chris also helping out as well, doing a lot of videos of their own, talking quarterbacks and tight ends, what they typically do. Make sure that you're also checking out. Tomorrow night is actually going to be a combined wide receiver running back show. So we're going to talk about both of them at the same time. So make sure you tune in for another live show tomorrow night. We're just going to do one this week. We're getting ready to wrap up the season. This is the last week, guys. We are actually not going to have any shows next week. So sorry to disappoint you if you were expecting more shows next week. But I've got this show tonight. I've got the show that I'm going to do tomorrow night talking running backs and wide receivers. And then Sunday will be the final RotoBaller game day of the year. Thanks again to everyone for tuning in, though. And then at that point, the season will be over with. So make sure you hit me up on Twitter if you have a Week 17 championship. And I will make sure that I help you out with as much information as possible. C-Max says, I hope I can pick up Derrick Henry this week. If you haven't already picked him up and he's still out there, he's definitely a guy that you have to grab right away. Let's jump over here real quick. So I said that we were going to talk running backs first. The first guy I want to talk about here real quick, New York Jets, Elijah McGuire. Not a guy that I really liked heading into this week. I did get a lot of questions about him, though. And then he did all right. He did all right. He got a touchdown. 18 carries, 42 yards, only good for a 2.33 yards per carry. Not something that you really want. 3 receptions for 29 yards. So again, overall not a bad week. On the last couple of weeks now, he's been really the lead back, and he's had that opportunity to showcase himself for next year a little bit. 17 carries and 18 carries, 60 yards in week 14, 42 in week 15. And that was against Buffalo and Houston, 2 really good defenses. So he gets the Green Bay Packers this week. Green Bay Packers a little bit better against the run than they are against the pass. But I would expect that same type of workload for Elijah McGuire this week. 17, 18 carries for the game. He's had 4 targets, 3 receptions, probably somewhere in that area, 20 to 30 receiving yards. So he's a guy, if you are in a PPR league and you really need help at your flex position, which a lot of you might, I have seen some really bad beats on Twitter the last 24 hours or so. There's a lot of people playing in championships this week. That were 4 or 5 or 6 seeds or whatever it may have been, and they made it in because maybe they had a little bit of luck, better to be lucky than good sometimes in fantasy football. So there might be a lot of teams playing this week that just need that help because they've been streaming guys. They got lucky in the playoffs. Maybe they caught a couple of teams that were down on players. Whatever it may be. Congratulations for being there. That doesn't matter. But if you are trying to stream some guys, Elijah McGuire is a running back to keep an eye on this week because I don't hate his matchup. So make sure you take a look at him. Next, got to bring up Jamal Williams from Green Bay. So let's stick in that same matchup, that Jets versus Green Bay matchup. And one of my wide receivers also will come up in this matchup here in a little bit. But we got to talk about Jamal Williams because Aaron Jones is more than likely done, if not for this week at least. More than likely the rest of the season. Because the Packers aren't playing for anything, I highly doubt we see Aaron Jones again this year. I did not love his matchup last week. So if you are a fan of the show and you've been watching, you've heard me say for several days now not to play Aaron Jones, to try and find somebody else. Hated the matchup, didn't like it. So hopefully you didn't have him in your lineup because then he ended up bombing for you because he got hurt and he didn't end up playing enough. So now we need to, Kel's talking about Robbie Anderson. We will in just a moment here. Yes, please make sure you hit that like button. Thank you, C-Mac. With Jamal Williams, he's going to be replacing, he's going to be replacing Aaron Jones. He's going to be the lead back. Jamal Williams against the Jets very well could get at least 20 carries, if not more. I've also heard reports that Aaron Rodgers could be out this week. Nothing has been confirmed with that at this time, at the time that we live stream / recorded this. So nothing has been set in stone for Sunday either when it comes to Aaron Rodgers. But there is a chance that they're relying on Jamal Williams. Now, Jamal Williams didn't have a bad week last week. 12 carries for 55 yards and a touchdown, added 4 receptions and 42 yards against the Chicago Bears defense that really shut down Todd Gurley a couple of weeks ago. It made him look mediocre at best. Jamal Williams comes in for Aaron Jones last week and does a pretty good job. So to say that I was surprised to see that stat line after Aaron Jones went out would be putting it mildly. But that's really, that's the first time since week 4 that he's had double-digit carries. Week 4 against Buffalo, he had 11 carries for 27 yards. Since then, 6-6, 4, 7, 3, 1, 1, 7, 4. So he hasn't really had that kind of a workload recently, but he's not a guy that's been very efficient with his carries either this season. Taking a look at Jamal Williams this week, I think is still a decent play for you, especially if you're an Aaron Jones owner. And at this point, you don't have any choice but to grab someone off waivers and start them. Jamal Williams offers you a decent shot. So I would definitely keep him on your radar this late in the season. If you need a running back, doesn't matter what waiver priority you have. Depending on your league, sometimes they've shut down waivers for guys who aren't in it anymore or for owners that aren't in it anymore. So if you're the only one that's in it with somebody else playing championship week or only 4 people, make sure you get those waivers in. Get Jamal Williams. I like him a little bit more than Elijah McGuire this week. I don't mind Elijah McGuire, but I do like Jamal Williams just a little bit more. M-Stag says, hey, Kyle, what's going on, man? Not much. Thanks for tuning in. He's on the verge of a championship in 2 leagues. Thanks for the advice all season. No problem. Glad you've been tuning in. What do I make of Doug Baldwin the rest of the season? It's inconsistent but good schedule. I think you got to run him out there after last week. Good week. He continues to have Russell Wilson's eye. If he's healthy, he's in there. Rod Thomas says, do you think Aaron Rodgers will play? My choices are Stafford or Tannehill or Sam Darnold. Do I think he'll play? I wouldn't be surprised. I don't think Aaron Rodgers wants to sit at all. But if they do end up resting him, obviously you're going to have to go Stafford, Tannehill, or Sam Darnold. Haven't dove into my start sits too much. I'm going to be working on that tomorrow a little bit more before the shows. My gut tells me right now that if Rodgers doesn't play, I will go Matthew Stafford. But don't hold me to that. We're going to have to talk about that one a little bit more. So, yeah, back to Jamal Williams. He's kind of my top running back add this week because I think he has the best upside, chance for most volume. Aaron Rodgers being out means that they're probably going to run on that, lean on that run game a little bit more. So I'm going to go that route. Another running back to talk about. This guy came out of nowhere this week. And if you're a Kenyon Drake owner, you might have thrown your computer or phone outside at the TV, whatever it may have been if you were watching the Miami game, because Kalen Ballage came out of nowhere this week. This is a guy who the most rushing attempts he's had in a game all year long is 4 in week 13. There's been a couple of weeks where he's been hurt and inactive. There's other weeks where he hasn't even had any carries. Only, 6 receptions all year long. And then this guy all of a sudden comes out against Minnesota, against a good Minnesota run defense, and all of a sudden just flattens them. 12 rushes, 123 yards, 1 touchdown, averaged 10.25 yards per carry. And this was after Frank Gore went out. And after Frank Gore went out, I had seen the news on my phone, and I thought for sure, okay, Kenyon Drake's going to help owners out that had to play him this week. And then Ballage comes out of nowhere and absolutely just tosses that out the window and said, nope, not happening. I'm going to be taking over. So he's a guy to take a look at. Unfortunately, he gets Miami gets Jacksonville in Week 16. That is not a matchup that I want to stick Kalen Ballage in my lineup for. He's like a deep grab. So if you're in like a 16-team league or something where waiver wires are as thin as can be and this guy is out there, then at that point maybe I take a shot. But against a Jacksonville run defense, I really don't have any interest in starting him again unless it is a very, very deep league. Let's see here real quick. Ugly Dude says, hey Kyle, I am late. No problem, man. Thanks for showing up. Rod Thomas, Robbie Anderson, or Josh Reynolds, or Curtis Samuel. Probably going to go Curtis Samuel, but I really like Robbie Anderson's matchup this week. So let's talk about him. Let's jump into wide receivers here real quick. Talking about Robbie Anderson. Robbie Anderson is probably my top waiver ad this week overall. So if there was one guy that I've written about or I've talked about that is under 50% owned right now, Robbie Anderson is probably that guy. And this is a guy I completely wrote off at the beginning of the season, but he started making his way back over the last couple of weeks, and he now puts himself in a position to help you close out the 2018 season on a strong note. Anderson could be back to being Sam Darnold's favorite target since Quincy Enunwa has missed time still. He hasn't been really healthy. And since Anderson missed the Jets' Week 10 matchup against the Buffalo Bills, he has averaged 7.5 targets per game, and he's seen his receiving yards climb every single week after finishing this week with 96 yards against the Houston Texans. Anderson also has back-to-back games with touchdowns now as well, and considering the Jets don't have much talent at wide receiver, he'll have more than enough chances to secure a few more before the season is over. So over the course of the next 2 weeks, Robbie Anderson, could get himself a couple of more touchdowns. And for, teams that still own him, maybe holding on to him this entire season has helped. If he's still on your waiver wire and you need a wide receiver start this week, this is a guy that I like. The Jets will get the Green Bay Packers in Week 16 at home. The Packers have given up the 3rd most fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers this season with 27.51. And the Jets' pass defense isn't much better because they're giving up the 4th most with 27.28 points allowed per game. So this could be a high-scoring game. This could offer plenty of upside for Anderson. Since he's barely owned in a corner of fantasy leagues, this is a guy that you could nab here in Week 16 that has a lot of wide receiver 2 upside for you. And that is why I am going with him as one of my top ads this week. Robert Mia asks, what about Mike Williams and Tyrell Williams? I don't like either of those guys. I am not going to grab either of them this week. No Mike Williams, no Tyrell Williams, because I hate the matchup against the Baltimore Ravens. Absolutely hate it. Even if Keenan Allen is out, I know if Keenan Allen is out, all of a sudden we say, hey, somebody's going to have to get those targets. Who's it going to be? I am saying at that point, I think that hurts these two even more. I think having a guy like Keenan Allen to take away from them actually would help them find space better. So this week, I don't like Mike Williams. This week, I don't like Tyrell. I don't like either of the Williams in Los Angeles. I don't like either of those Williams guys out in Los Angeles this week. I'm actually going to stay away from both of them. I'm not going to make a move for them this week. I'm not going to have them in my lineups this week. I just don't think this offers you any good chances playing in championship week or looking for a trip to the championship round, whatever it may be for you. I don't like either of those opportunities. So stay away from both of those guys this week. Do I feel safe starting Alshon next week after the game that he just had? Yeah, you probably have to have him in your lineup. I think at least a wide receiver 3. So we just talked about Robbie Anderson. Let's jump back here real quick to Robert Foster from Buffalo. Another sneaky play that I like that you can grab this week. He might not be much sneakily, as we say on this show, might not be sneakily any longer. He is only 13% owned currently, though, and the Buffalo Bills will head to New England in Week 16, facing a Pats team that's fresh off an irritating loss to the Pittsburgh Steelers. So over the last 4 weeks, the Patriots have allowed 23.80 fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. That's 15th most in the league, so they're about average so far over the last few weeks. The opportunity for Robert Foster to offer you as a fantasy owner some upside this week will absolutely be there. Over his last 5 games, Robert Foster has averaged 3.4 receptions on 4.6 targets for 87.6 receiving yards. During that time frame, Foster is also averaging an absurd 25.76 yards per reception. He's Josh Allen's favorite target right now. He has the big playability. This is a guy that can absolutely, at any point in time, snap off a huge gain, a huge reception, find the end zone, get in there, get it done, and offer you tremendous, at least wide receiver 3 value, especially in a game like playing against the Patriots. So I think he's a guy that you also take a look at this week if you are searching for a wide receiver to really help you out, whether it be flex or wide receiver 3. I think this guy can fit either of those opportunities. So if you're a guy out there that does, if you're an owner out there that does have an issue filling a spot this week, those two at wide receiver, Robbie Anderson, Robert Foster, are 2 of my favorite ads right now. Ferris wants to know Galladay, Baldwin, or Ridley. Still, again, haven't jumped into the start sit quite yet. I'm going to start doing that tomorrow, so I don't want to answer and get ahead of myself. Kells wants to know Robbie or Galladay. Gonna lean Galladay right now, but we'll have to see what happens. Again, let me get into that research a little bit more. We'll talk about that tomorrow night. I'll be here live again tomorrow night, probably about the same time, and we'll talk wide receivers and running backs tomorrow night start sit show. Let's jump over here again. Let's go back real quick. Jordy Nelson, I want to talk about him again. He was one of my favorite under the radar plays this past week in week 15, and his performance wasn't great. It's his 3rd straight solid performance though. So if you're an owner that has had to play Jordy Nelson at all, he hasn't lit up the scoreboard, but he hasn't been bad either. The Oakland Raiders, I mean, they're void of pass catchers. So you have Jared Cook, you have Jalen Richard, then you have Jordy Matthews. That's about it right now. And the Raiders will get the Denver Broncos at home in Week 16, another matchup that should afford fantasy owners a shot at a wide receiver 3 performance from Jordy Nelson. Broncos are giving up 24.08 fantasy points per game over the last 4 weeks to opposing wide receivers. All that's missing right now really for Nelson is the touchdowns. Outside of that, though, he's packing the box score with other stats. 7.3 receptions per game, 8.6 targets per game, 77.6 receiving yards per game. I expect similar numbers here in Week 16. But again, if he can find the end zone, he really steps up his ability for you, and he falls firmly into at least wide receiver 3 category if he finds the end zone. If not, he could struggle to get there with those numbers, but he could be in that vicinity, especially in a PPR league. Brian's asking about Damian Williams. Yeah, as long as Spencer Ware isn't back. If Spencer Ware is back, then Damian Williams doesn't offer you a ton of upside. So that one, we're going to have to wait and see what happens. We're going to have to wait and see what happens with that. Tim Patrick. So Tim Patrick now from Denver, another wide receiver, only 3% owned. After Emmanuel Sanders went down, it was really everyone flocking to Courtland Sutton as the new wide receiver in Denver. But Tim Patrick has basically said in his best Lee Corso voice, not so fast. He's outperformed Sutton in the last 2 games. Sutton hasn't looked great in either game. So are we buying Tim Patrick as the Broncos wide receiver to own next week? Possibly. The Broncos are going to get Oakland. They're giving up the 13th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers this year. And the last 2 weeks combined, Patrick has 12 receptions on 18 targets for 150 receiving yards with a touchdown. More than likely, he's going to be able to continue that trend against Oakland. So even if you don't need somebody to start this week, I would still recommend grabbing Patrick as depth on your bench. Grab him, stick him on your bench, and then if there's a late season or a late week injury or something that happens where maybe the weather's really bad somewhere, Tim Patrick is a guy that you could throw in there. And just toss one more wide receiver out, Antonio Callaway. Every time I mention his name, it seems like he bombs the next week, but I keep bringing him up. He's been a roller coaster, but he had 62 receiving yards and a touchdown last week, so the opportunity continues to be there. They get the Bengals. Obviously, the Browns are going to want to put up some numbers on the Bengals. They would really like to do that. Real quick, before we get going, a few more things here real quick. Rod Thomas asked if I trust Keenum. I don't trust him by any means. I don't trust him to make Tim Patrick a wide receiver 1, but I trust him to at least get Tim Patrick the football for some looks, get him some targets at least. A few more things here. Talking about quarterbacks, Lamar Jackson is still under 50% owned. He's the guy that you need to keep an eye on. If you own Lamar Jackson with his rushing abilities right now, I think he's at least a quarterback 1 every single week. So unless you have one of the top tier quarterbacks or someone with a better matchup than Lamar Jackson is in my lineup. Same goes for Josh Allen right now. He's not great as a passer, but his ability to run the football on the ground, put the ball in the end zone on the ground, all of those different things make him a quarterback 1 every single week at this point. So unless you have somebody that is a for sure stud in front of him, a top level tier quarterback, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson offer more than enough upside every single week to get into your lineup. Talking tight ends here really quick again. Chris Herndon is another guy. I continue to mention him. Only 12% owned. 3 catches for 53 yards last week. He hasn't scored in quite some time, though. So, I mean, he's been a decent play. If you need someone to just get you some numbers, if you need somebody to just get you a couple of catches, a few points, you don't want to zero out of your tight end spot, He does that well. Vernon Davis, if Jordan Reed is out, Vernon Davis again offers another opportunity. You gotta be careful of Jeremy Sprinkle, but I don't take too much into that touchdown he had last week. At this point, though, tight end is really bare. I think Chris Herndon is really the guy that I continue to focus on every single week as a safe play because he seems to get targets every single week. Let me double check the chat here real quick. Do I think Jared Goff is going to feast on Arizona and San Fran? I really hope so. I hope he gets back to what he's supposed to be doing. I don't own him in any leagues, but we'll have to see what happens with that. Should I pick up Allen? I have Wilson. Wilson is the guy that I will continue to start over Allen. So I'm not going to start Allen over Wilson right now. I'll start Wilson instead. But if you are playing in a couple of weeks, you might want to stash him just in case. Will Derrick Henry make it 3 good games in a row? He absolutely has the opportunity to do that. AP wants to know what about Samuel in Pittsburgh. Is he still a tight end play? He's not a tight end play if Connor comes back. We'll have to see, though. We'll have to see. We have to keep an eye on that throughout the week. But we're going to get ready to wrap this thing up here right now. Monday Night Football, second half, getting ready to kick off again here real quick. Asking about Allen over Cam. Nope, still going to go Cam. Cam over Allen. So appreciate everyone tuning in, whether or not you watch the live stream or you're tuning in to the recorded show afterwards. Make sure you hit me up on Twitter at krich1532. That's where I'll be able to answer the most of your questions this week. So make sure you hit me up there. DMs are always open. I can get back to you and help you out that median instead. Appreciate everyone again tuning in tonight. The last waiver wire show of 2018. Hard to believe the season is almost over at this point. Good luck to everyone this week. Again, I'll be right back here tomorrow night doing a live running back wide receiver show as well. I'll answer some start-sit questions then. We'll talk about my favorite plays of the week, and we'll go from there. Thanks so much again for tuning in. Have a great night, everyone, and we'll catch you tomorrow. Thanks.